the highest honor I could achieve. Because what he was saying is that I had captured the essence in these of the very tradition of the icon painting, rather than being a Western painter who has to put in all these flourishes to make it different. So I left them there. He prayed for them. And then it got weird because Vika said, he just prayed for your perfection. Now, as a Mennonite, how can I even think of having somebody pray for my perfection? Of course, for the Russian Orthodox, that means that I will be transformed into being like Jesus. That's what they meant by this word. And I know some of the Russian words. I'm not going to bore you with them because I usually pronounce them wrong. And they're just, I don't know if there are any people with Russian Mennonite heritage here who would be able to correct me. So he prayed this, and I realized as we said our goodbyes after this year that this had been an amazing journey for me to have blessed these icons and have them where they were. And it reminded me, this is an earlier piece, and I put labels there if you want to read where these are from. These are from different of my series. I discovered that in this coming to the icon painting world, to the Orthodox Church, that I had sort of fallen in love with this piece of work. I had learned to listen, which is something, you know, Susan would say, would maybe agree. I listen to Glenn a lot. But I'd learned this pattern of studying, meditation, of prayer, of drawing, listening, and then painting, receiving and responding. And as one icon writer, Sherrard, says, it should be remembered that as an artist, we are as much chosen as we are choosing. That we are simply sort of like the messenger or the instrument, or even maybe the victim of this power that comes and that we have to obey. And that's sort of what this fire in the bones image is about. I did a series there in Philadelphia at the Mennonite school there called Art of the Call, and it's all about images of being called and what it means, and this is the fire in the bones. So, the most frightening icon to paint is to actually try to paint one of Jesus. Because I thought, okay, you know, you can paint these saints, they're just average, ordinary people, but what are you doing when you paint an icon of Jesus? But I decided that I needed to try to do this because of the welcome that I had received in this Russian Orthodox Church. And just to say, they stand for all their services, and they usually last 2.5 to 3 hours. And when I would first start attending, I would attend the services sometimes, and they have a choir that sings all this stuff. It's a beautiful choir. And there were a lot of older women that would come, and they would stand for 3 hours, or kneel and stand, kneel, stand. And after one of the first or second services, one of the choir members who spoke English came up to me and said, you know, the women, they would understand if you had to sit down because they know you're from the U.S. Oh, yes. Okay. I stood. But they would help me. Even though they didn't speak English, they would sort of help me move around because the service would happen and you had to sometimes move to get out of the way of things happening, and they would try to explain everything to me without speaking to me, which I found to be really welcoming and fascinating. But what I began to learn is that the icon is there to help us open our minds and our beings to what we are to be transformed into. And it is the task of the iconographer to remind us that we are actually in the presence of the kingdom of God. And the Orthodox believe that their services at a typical worship service, and just imagine this, that every saint who's ever lived is here with us worshiping. Because they don't believe that, you know, when you die you just go to some unknown place, that you still are active in the spiritual world. So our job is to remind them that we are present. This icon is based on one that's in at St. Catherine's in the Sinai Desert. It's a 6th century icon. The other thing you'll learn as you paint icons is that you don't create something on your own. you work within the tradition. So all the icons you work with a few slight exceptions, which we'll get to later, you work out of an icon that already exists. So this is 6th century. It's called the Blessing Christ. And in an icon, if you see Jesus with this, it means he's blessing you. You're going to see a lot of this. The second thing that you should notice, and maybe it's a little hard to see, is that he's not symmetrical in this icon. Meaning one eye is smaller than the other eye. And what this signifies is that with one eye, Jesus is looking into us and seeing everything that exists there and the reality of who we are. That's scary. And the other eye is offering us mercy and grace. And this is what the Blessing Christ does to us. But the theology of the icon for the Orthodox comes primarily, or from this verse in Colossians. He is the image, and in Greek this is actually the word icon, of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And so Jesus became the first icon for us, the first person that we could see living out what it means to be in the image of what we are called to be. So I'm going to list 5 things that I see my job as an artist to do. 5, I know, sermons are supposed to, did they teach you the 3-point sermon? And that's all going out the window, isn't it? So I'm not going to get in trouble with 5. I always overdo things, by the way, and my friends already know this. So the first is incarnational. The job of an artist, my job as I see it, is to be incarnational. That means I try to create art that lives out the life of Jesus and not to separate. We have this temptation to sort of live in a spiritual world and then let our bodies be over here. And the idea of the incarnation is that our spiritual lives and our physical lives go together. And we experience both hope and pain. We experience the story and narrative of our own journey and the journeys of those around us. And we become less abstract. And here's a little interesting thing. Okay, so at Mount Sinai in the St. Catherine's, there's like 76 of the oldest icons in the world are in this. And 30 of them have Mary in. And it's really fascinating that an art historian that comes from the West goes in and says there are 36 icons of Mary in this monastery, which is more than there would be, more than of Jesus. And I read this and I say, this is only because you don't understand. Because every icon of Mary has Mary pointing to Jesus in the icon itself. Because from the West, we think size is the most important thing. In the icon world, you learn how to look at the cues, and every one of Mary's icons is Mary pointing to Jesus as this is the way that you should look. So what this means as I began to journey on this is that our lives and how we live and breathe in our bodies is as much a part of our spiritual life as is the abstract words we like to speak, which is a counteraction to some of our own ideas. But just to say, I could have much more easily started with photography. That's sort of the medium that I work in most. I spend a lot of time. I could have started in Klaipeda, the city I spent the year in, and shown you the beautiful reflections and all the kinds of stuff. I could have looked at the way I try to photograph and find strange ways to see beauty. These are the street sweepers in Riga on the right here. These are both from Riga, Latvia. And, you know, if you get up early enough in the morning, you see this in operation. They go out and sweep the streets by hand before. But photography forces us to look at light and shadow. Remember this, without shadow, there is no light. Isn't that sweet? We usually think the other way. Without light, there is no shadow. But so photography teaches us to think about different ways of seeing. So the second way I think about an artist working is that I have to see differently. I have to retrain my eyes, and it's not just retraining the physical eye, but it's retraining the way my brain sees. I could look at this and say, oh, looking at the light is beautiful. What happens if you look the other way from the light? This is the tube. This is from another series that I did. I don't know. This is I guess, were you still coming? Were we still part of the... This was in Columbus at the Mennonite Church USA convention. It's a stained glass cross that I built. Light reveals the texture and the nuance and the variation and the color of what we do. And I guess this is 3 meters high for those of you who speak metric. I can convert just a few things. But I also spent time pointing my camera into lights because I think it's important. What do we see when the lights come? I spent time trying to stop motion and see what a drop of water looks like when it is no longer falling but is suspended in the air. But even more than that, I spent time trying to think about how you show something that we can't see physically. This is a photographic technique called infrared. I shot this in infrared because I wanted to see if I could find a way to show the horror of this place, because it's gorgeous. If you had seen this in a regular photograph, all that is white would be green grass, beautiful green grass. You got that beautiful birch tree there standing on the hill. You got this nice rough wall. But if you know the history, 175,000 people went and stood in front of this wall and were shot by the Germans. So how do you bring that kind of reality? So part of my training is to help us think about different ways of thinking, which will lead us to Maria Skobtsova. This is one of the icons I painted during my semester there, and it would be a really long story to explain to you how I even found out about her. But Maria was born in Riga, which was about 100 kilometers away from where we were living. She had gone to Moscow and studied, became part of the Bolshevik Revolution, got disenchanted with it because she began to think that they didn't really care about the average person, was put on the hit list for both the Red and White armies, escaped to Paris. In Paris, she became an Orthodox nun, but only with the, this seems a little strange. She was also a poet and an artist. She said only with the understanding that the true Eucharist is when I give my life on the street. It's not when I break the bread loaf apart in the worship service. And so she created this home for street people and offered care and concern to them. And at the beginning of then, as the war, World War II started and the Germans began to invade, she had the chance to escape and come to North America. She chose to stay in Paris. And as the Germans began to round up Jews, she began to harbor Jews. And then she set up this system where the garbage collectors would sneak into the ghettos and bring out children inside the garbage cans and send them off to be taken care of out in the countryside. When the Germans came for her, they said, "Are there any Jews here?" And Maria was kind of one of these feisty people, and you'll find out more about her. She said, "Of course there are." She went to the wall, pulled off an icon of Mary and Jesus, and said, "Here." She died on Good Friday at Ravensbrück in the gas chamber. I became fascinated by her. I read a lot of her writings. She's a very, very interesting person. But she also, and this is sometimes when it frightens even me, is that she began to talk to me as I was working on this icon. And the words she said to me were profound unworthiness. This is not how people usually treat you. Like, you're supposed to be kind to people, you're doing such a nice job. Profound unworthiness. She said this to me. So I went in the next Monday. At this time, it's frigid outside. The sun is only up for about 5 hours a day. I'm going to these meetings with my paints in my down jacket to keep them from freezing on the bus, because the bus did not get above freezing inside. I'm counting bus stops because you can't see out the windows. They're so fogged over. I get there. I go to Father Vladimir and say, "Yeah, Maria was talking to me, and she said profound unworthiness." And he goes, "Yeah." And I thought, oh, so he doesn't think it's strange that she's talking to me. And number two, he doesn't think it's strange that she's saying things like this to me. A more typical nice saint would have said, you know, this is really an amazing opportunity you're getting, and you're really not worthy of everything, because he was giving me this day a week for nothing. No strings attached, no expectation that I'd become Orthodox, no money. But no, Maria is this kind of person that's going to look you in the eye and tell you the way it is. Profound unworthiness. And I began to realize how amazing the gifts were that I had been receiving, not only in this time, but in continued times. But back to the photographic journey. This is the other site in Lithuania. At this site, about 250,000 Jews were killed by the Germans. Lithuania is where the Germans experimented with methodologies to kill Jews in mass numbers. This all predates the gas chambers in Poland. They experimented with guns, which is rather inefficient, actually. They experimented with gas vans, where they put you in vans and drive you around till you all died from the carbon monoxide that they piped back into the box. And when I first went to Lithuania, I tried to find this site. The bus drivers didn't know where it was. The guides didn't know where it was. And I realized that this is a hidden part of their history, because at the end of the war, Lithuania was forced to become part of the Soviet Union, and the Soviets totally eradicated all the memory of what the Germans had done and turned it into the Germans killing Soviet partisans. But I was working hard to try to understand how to make sense of this, how to bring this into my visual work. I wrote poetry, I wrote songs. We'll get to a couple songs, and one will even relate maybe. Unfortunately, your art never goes out of business, meaning there are always things happening in the world. But I began to think about what it means to live in Lithuania. And I did a couple pieces of art. The first one, called Alien, to think about how we treat, or how people coming in are treated. Because one of the, and if you have you paid attention to the news for last year? Okay, you've heard that Russia has been messing around in the Ukraine. If you live in Lithuania, this frightens you greatly. Because in 1990, 89, and 90, the KGB did the exact same thing to Lithuania. Lithuania declared their independence in 1990, and while this movement was happening, the KGB sent undercover paratroopers in without markings on the uniforms. Ever heard of that happening? It's amazing. They sent them in, and they tried to stir up unrest. The Lithuanians, and I think this is really amazing, maintained their nonviolence throughout their complete protest. The Soviets then brought in the Black Beret, and they killed 14 people on what they call Bloody Sunday. Everybody has their own Bloody Sunday. In January, drove over them with tanks, 14 people that were in this nonviolent protest, but it really broke the Soviet Union. And Gorbachev really continued to fall apart. The wall went down in Berlin. So this is part of this crumbling, and Putin actually has blamed the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, for the breakup of the Soviet Union. So they get nervous when they watch what Putin does. But these things don't change. So how do you treat these aliens? Because for the Lithuanians, there are about 25% of the population are native Russian speakers. How do you treat these native Russian speakers? So I think this is an issue, and we've talked a lot about this. And part of my job as an artist is to bring these stories to light and think about them. These are two monuments in Klaipėda, the third largest city, the city on the seacoast where I live for most of the time, and they are 1 block apart. Let me tell you the story of these two monuments. It may help you to understand how difficult it is as an artist to work in this milieu, make friends, and really build relationships. On the left is a massive monument to the Soviet liberators of Lithuania. Did you get that? So at the end of the war, as the war was closing up, World War II, the Soviets came in and invaded Lithuania and kicked the Germans out. Now, if you know history, you know that 4 years earlier, the Soviets had been there and had sent a couple 100,000 from Lithuania to Siberia. So this is not a good news thing. But the Soviets came in, kicked the Germans out, reoccupied Lithuania. And so they put up the statue to all the Soviet soldiers who died to liberate Lithuania from the Germans. Then you walk 1 block away from that, and you see this statue on the right. And this is a statue for all those who were sent to Siberia by the Soviets. And if you go around, there's markers to all these families. There's hardly any Lithuanian family that doesn't have somebody who went to Siberia. Or many people who went to Siberia. And so this is how they have to live. So my job as an artist, when I enter, and I've done a lot of work, I've had exhibits there of a variety of things, which we can talk about later because there's no time now, is how you bring those two stories together, recognizing that both of them have some part of the reality of this existence, but also recognizing that this is a great amount of pain that's on the soul of the people. And we could talk about Lithuania leads the world in the suicide rate for males, and I would argue that part of that is this double narrative that they live with all the time. Alcohol doesn't help, but that's a whole other thing. Okay, so what this leads to is my third criteria that I consider important for those of an artist, and that is that we engage in the pain of a place. We have to be willing to hear the pain, to maybe actually try to live in the pain, and bring that pain into our art, because art should not be about ignoring the pain, but responding to the pain. And this is where we're going to do a song soon. So, Kate, you can come up. And this also relates to current events in the U.S. In 1992, I interviewed Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson is an African-American. He's a lawyer. He graduated #1 from Harvard. And he has spent his life doing one thing, fighting against cases of capital punishment in the U.S. And I asked him first why he does this. And he said, well, if you believe in Jesus, then you must believe in the possibility of redemption. If you believe in the possibility of redemption, then you cannot kill somebody without giving them that chance to live and have the chance to change. And he went on for a lot of things. So then next question I asked him is, how do you keep doing this? Because you lose most of the time. And he's still doing it. So he's been doing this for over 30 years. And he said to me, well, during the civil rights movement and the bus boycott, and I love this story because the young people like to think that they're the hip people who can do things, right? We all thought that when we were, back there. We aren't going to talk about the year. We all thought we could do great things. Okay, so the story goes that these young people were sitting in the church saying, maybe we should stop the bus boycott because the old women are getting tired of walking to work 5 miles every day. And the story goes that one of the old women got up and said, my feet may be tired, but my soul is rested. I can go on a while. And so I wrote this song a couple years later to honor all the peacemakers that I've had the privilege of meeting who just keep going. And yeah, Nick, you'll be up here. And you're welcome to join along. It's a song and sing, I sing a line and you sing a line kind of thing. And Kate's going to be helping you because she's better than Dad anyway. Though the way seems hard, and my feet are tired, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Okay, that's all the melody line you need alone. The third and fourth lines you sing with me. And you can harmonize because, you're supposed to have that genetically implanted, right? Okay, let's go from the top. Though the way seems hard, and my feet are tired, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Though the way seems dark, and my eyes are scared, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Oh, I can go on a while. I can go and threatens to drown. I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Though the way seems long, with no end in sight, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. I can go on a while. I can go on a while. I can go on a while. I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Though the way seems pain, and my memory is seared, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Though the way seems barbed, and they threaten to kill, I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. Oh, I can go on a while. I can go on a while. I can go on a while. I can go on a while 'cause my soul is rested. So, I did a project long ago. This is one of my early visual projects of this nature. Was called Seeing Jesus. And this happened because I was in London doing a video with the Anabaptist Network there, and I went to the gallery and I saw this amazing exhibition called Seeing Salvation. And there were like 20-some rooms of art at whatever that big gallery is in the middle of London. And there were like, I don't remember the exact number, like 16 rooms of nativity art from the birth of Jesus. And then there were one room that had a couple pieces from the life of Jesus. And then there were like two rooms of crucifixion images and one room of resurrection. And I walked through this and I came home and thought, they've missed so much of what is about Jesus for me. Because if we understand the life, remember we go back to point one, which was incarnational, I had to think about where Jesus was. And so you'll see this in another series I did that respond to that. And so I did a series called Sermon on the Mount of 4 images. And they come from people that I know or met in my privileged life of meeting a lot of people. The top is Wanner Garcia from Havana, Cuba. Yeah, I had to fly through Canada because Canadians are allowed to go to Cuba. I was not allowed as an American. So she was a pastor through the revolution, before the revolution and after. And you can see a little photo in the bottom of her when she was a younger woman. So I interviewed her and I put her here, Love Your Enemy. The second one is John Perkins, who was a civil rights activist, and he tells a story of being beaten by the sheriff's almost to death during the civil rights times. And so I called him Go the Extra. Turn the Other has a reference to Dirk Willem's story out of Martyr's Mirror, and this is a Costa Rican Mennonite historian, and he told me some of his life. And then the bottom is Lawrence Hart, who's a Cheyenne peace chief and a Mennonite pastor in Oklahoma. And he told stories about how he recreated relationships with the grandchildren of the 9th Cavalry, which is the cavalry that wiped out his tribe in the 1800s. So very fascinating people. So now this leads into the fourth idea that I care about as an artist, and that is that we begin to think about transformation. So we don't do our art just to do art, but we do our art to bring transformation or to think about transformation, to create new understandings, to retell stories. This is a photograph from the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. This is a place that has somewhere over 500,000 crosses on a little hill, and tourists come there and take photos. But if they knew the history of this hill, and the Soviets, during the Soviet occupation, would come in with bulldozers and bulldoze this hill down because this represented a spiritual understanding of life, and at night the Lithuanians would sneak back out and plant crosses on this hill again. And the Soviets bulldozed it 3 times, and each time the Lithuanians would come out and replant this hill. So it's both a protest, it's an active protest, but it's a transformation of the story they were on. I also did a Stations of the Cross for Anabaptists called On the Way. We aren't going to take time to go through all those, but it's simply to rethink about how we tell the Jesus story. Because if the Jesus story is only about the cross, then we forget all about the transformation that his life has to offer us. And so this takes us through all the passages that I think reflect where Jesus got himself into trouble, which actually happen regularly if you happen to read the New Testament, especially Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in particular. Yeah, read the others too if you want. Actually, I think if we reread Paul, and my job as an artist, I've started collecting ideas to... Anybody know who Tekla is? No, Kate, you can't say because I told you on the way out. Okay, Tekla is, well, I guess first century. A first century martyr in Ephesus. And if you go to Ephesus and you go up into a cave in the hill, you'll see an icon of Paul standing like this with a book. And next to Paul, you'll see a woman named Tekla standing with the exact same pose holding a book. And she was Paul's co-worker, which we don't know much about. Sometime in the 3rd or 4th century, when people began to wonder if women really should be doing this kind of leadership, somebody came by and scratched her face off. So I'm thinking about redoing that icon, because I think it's important for us to make sure we keep looking at these things in the right way. So anyway, during my time with the Orthodox priest painting, I was a Mennonite, and I was looking for ways to try to connect my own faith journey with the journey there. And I began to read into this Orthodox theology, and I cruised over to this Orthodox Peace Fellowship. They have a massive website. And on there I found St. Maximilian. And I thought, wow, I heard about him growing up. Anybody know who Maximilian is? Woohoo! Yeah. Okay, so Maximilian was a 3rd century martyr who refused to join the Roman army. And they tried to get his father to convince him, and his father says, well, he knows what he thinks. And then they tried to get him to take the seal of Rome. And he said, no, I'm already got the seal of Jesus. And so I then began to search for an icon that I could work with for Maximilian, because he connected with this idea of refusing to join the military. And so I couldn't find any. So I emailed Jim Forrest, who wrote the book Praying with Icons and was also part of this Orthodox Peace Fellowship. And he lives in Amsterdam. And I said, I'm a Mennonite. I'm learning to paint icons here, and I'm looking for an icon of Maximilian. And his first line back was, chuckle, chuckle, a Mennonite painting icons. Maybe the kingdom of God is coming. And then he said there aren't any that he knows of that are good. There's some modernistic ones, but so he said maybe you and Father can create one. Well, that was a challenge. Being who I am, I would of course take that up. And so I began to study all the martyrs and the way they looked. I did a drawing similar to this. I took it in to Father, and he said, so who's this? I said, this is Maximilian. He said, oh, March 12th. March 12th? Well, yeah, that's his feast day. Okay. Yeah, so he knew who he was. He also was pretty savvy. I'm sure he understood why I had chosen Maximilian. And I said, but but I just drew this. I didn't have any to work from, so if you want me to, I will tear it up, because I had agreed when I went to study with him that I would stay within the Orthodox tradition for at least the year I studied with him. In terms of, and the translation came back, yes, you must. So I was about ready to rip this paper apart, and he said, no, you must paint it. So that's the result. This is in Russian script. I learned to write Russian, and this is in Greek, based on where they are historically. So Maximilian is a different way to tell the story. He's telling the story that I'm sealed with Christ. You see the anchor that I put in this, which is an early Christian symbol of being anchored in Jesus, about you're finding your salvation in Jesus. All martyrs hold a cross in iconography, so I gave him a cross. And then we could talk about color, which we don't have a lot of time, but red and blue symbolize this humanity being cloaked now in divinity as he becomes a saint, welcomed into the kingdom. So I wanted us to rethink about how we tell the story. And so Maximilian has become very important. I sent a photo back then to Jim Forrest, who put it up on his website because he was so excited to see something that was in the naive Russian tradition of icon style. Which leads us to a second song. Because I think part of our challenge as artists is to help us understand or think about where we go and what risks we take to be faithful in our lives. And this was written for a bunch of young people in my church who were contemplating going off to places like Burkina. Their words, if you click next. There we are. You'll get there eventually. Oh, by the way, where are you going in Burkina? Do you know who the missionaries are? Okay, because two of my former students are actually going to Burkina this fall too. So say hi to James and Colt. And you're welcome to sing along or just listen, your choice. I will stay where you plant me, Lord, where you plant me, Lord, I will grow. I will go where you send me, Lord, where you send me, Lord, I will go. I will be where you choose, Lord, where you choose, Lord, I will be. Though the winds may blow so hard, though the drought may come, though it may be so difficult, Lord, I'm on your ground. I will stay where you plant me, Lord, where you plant me, Lord, I will grow. I will go where you send me, Lord, where you send me, Lord, I will go. I will be where you choose, Lord, you choose, Lord, I will be. Though it may be confusing, though it seems out of control, though I have to wait so long, Lord, I'm on your time. I will stay where you plant me, Lord, where you plant me, Lord, I will grow. I will go where you send me, Lord, where you send me, Lord, I will go. I will be where you choose, Lord, where you choose, Lord, I will be. Though I have unclean lips, though I may be lost, though I live in a desperate place, Lord, I have seen you. I will stay where you plant me, Lord, where you plant me, Lord, am sometimes afraid. Wonder how will it be? Let it be according to your word. Lord, I am here. I will stay where you plant me, Lord. Where you plant me, Lord, I will go. I will go where you send me, Lord. Where you send me, Lord, I will go. I will be where you choose, Lord. Where you choose, Lord, I will be. Okay, this is the Madonna at the Gates of Dawn, and I found this fascinating. The Madonna is actually a black Madonna. The Gates of Dawn are the one city gate still standing in Vilnius, Lithuania, and everybody from Napoleon, Hitler, and Stalin have marched through this gate to try to take over the city. And the one thing still remaining is the Madonna. And as I began this journey with icons, my assumption as a Westerner was sort of almost Buddhist. I hate to tell you this. They won't kick me out of this, will they? You know, like you would go to an icon and you would, you look at it and meditate, nice, nice, nice. What I discovered is that these icons' sole purpose in existence is to help me transform into the image of Jesus. And so we, with unveiled faces, see the glory of the Lord, though reflected in the mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree to another. And this comes from the Spirit of the Lord. So we are to be transformed. And then there's lots of fun things that happen in icons. So for instance, this is the Ascension. And when I started this, you know, you read, okay, the icons are just sort of like straight up historical, yes, okay? So I began to look at this icon as I was drawing and working on it, and I discovered something strange. Have the Ascension, do you do the lectionary here? Okay. That's okay, Glenn, I absolve you of that sin, but no. Okay, so the Ascension happened not very long ago. How many think Paul was at the Ascension? Put your hand down. You don't want to look like that. Okay. Yeah, you remember Paul was still, like, he was out there ready to kill Christians? Well, in the icon, Paul is in the Ascension. Icon. That's him right to the right of Mary. First person, Paul. Notice how you can always tell Paul in the icons, he has a big forehead. I'm trying to get there. And he's holding a book because he's a writer of books. To the left of Mary is Peter. I don't know why Peter always gets yellow hair, but he does. He's only holding a scroll because he didn't write books. He only wrote letters. Next to him is Andrew. Andrew always has spiky hair. Go figure. I don't know why. Next to him is Matthew. If you go clear over to the right end, that's John, because John is always pictured as the youngest disciple, and he's also a writer of a book. You can see Thomas up there. You learn a lot of things. So what I began to discover is that these icons are theological, meaning they are making a theological argument about what is important or what is happening. And this theological argument is that Jesus is now passing on the job of being the incarnation, being the image of God to the church. And this is the church taking that job on. And you'll see Mary is in the center because Mary, because she carried Jesus, now comes to symbolize the church. The church that carries Jesus into the world. That's beautiful, isn't it? And because this one started, the original to this is from Mount Sinai. If you look really closely, you'll see little red dots around her head. Those are roses. And that's to signify the burning bush. So the church is becoming the voice of God into the world. And in many of these ascensions, which I find fascinating, the disciples look slightly confused. And so I asked Father Vladimir, why do the disciples look confused? He says, because they are. And I began to understand that what this icon is telling us theologically is it's okay when we don't understand everything. In fact, we as the church are not ever to understand everything. And so that leads us to point number 5. And point number 5 is we are to embrace the mystery. We are to understand that we never will understand everything, that we don't know everything. And so I don't know what, I don't follow the church press enough here, but in America, in the U.S., we have a number of Christians who think they know absolutely everything that God thinks. And what my year with icons has taught me is we know only a little bit, and that we need to come to embrace the mystery. And my job as an artist is to help us do that. Probably the most famous piece of work I did is called One. This is my representation of the church long before I did the Ascension, is the loaf, and it contains people from all over the world. Australia is the only continent missing because I didn't have photographs from there. They were either shot by myself or my cousin Wayne. So we created this image. But we are to embrace the mystery. We are to know that we don't understand it all. And we are to see what develops out of that wonderful mystery. And that means, what do I see in these images? I love doing photographs and then going back about a year later, because while I have an intent when I shoot the photographs, there are many things I discover. The one on the left is from that circle in the ground where 250,000 Jews were killed. I wanted to come back and show you other ways to think about how we reclaim this story. And the one on the right is from the Hill of Crosses again. But we learn to wonder, when we go out for a cup of coffee with somebody we don't know, what will I discover here? Maria Skoptsova, if you remember St. Maria of Paris here, said that we should approach life as every person we meet has a part of the image of God in them. And that's how we should see them. That's really hard to do. What might I learn or experience from meeting this person? But we should be able to see them. And then lastly, the last image is from the wind of the Spirit that moves us in mysterious ways that we don't know. So my job, I think, and I hope your job as just being people who are alive and should be creative in some form, is to embrace the mystery, be engaged with our context, and live in the physical space we live in with our eyes wide open. And I'm going to close with just one song, which I'm not going to ask you to sing, because you probably can't. It's a very new song. I teach at EMU, and I don't get to teach graduate students very often. But last year, I had the privilege of working with a Bulgarian woman who's working on a joint counseling Center for Justice and Peace Building degree, something or other. I don't understand how they do all those things. I just teach. And she wanted to do a photographic project in Bulgaria. So she came to me, and I taught her to do photography so she could go back and do. And she did a big exhibit. And in one of her interviews, Bulgaria is also another former Soviet bloc country. They're experiencing a great deal of economic problems and challenges. They also are right now, if you follow the news, there where everybody is trying to flee into the European Union by land from, say, Syria, Iraq, Iran, etc. All has to come through Bulgaria, because that's where Turkey meets the European Union. And so they're facing a lot of problems. And her quote in this little interview was, "How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope?" And I read that a couple times and realized that was a challenge to me, because I have had the privilege of meeting people in more challenging and frustrating places in the world than I can sometimes remember. But it helped me to think about the fact that in each of those places I met amazing and beautiful people. And if we would turn our way of thinking around to think about how these people we meet should give us hope and not despair. So I wrote a song to respond to that. And it's full of stories of people I've met. And I can annotate it if you want. That means you stop singing and you do like little footnotes. It's a typical way most musicians work, right? Only if you're an academic who thinks they have to put footnotes on their papers. How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? How can you look in their eyes and not see the light? How can you hear the story and not receive the gift? How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? A couple times I've taken students to little circles that I showed you photographically. I have met students whose families died there, and I've met students whose families killed people there. So, Rena stands at the circle, placed in the ground, where Germans shot and tortured her grandfather. Sonny looks on in horror, 'cause her uncle held the gun. Now they stand here as simple friends. From presidential palace to a polar cap prison, her father's long journey under iron-fisted Stalin, standing in the line eye with Soviet tanks, and as wrinkles gather around her smile. So this is about a 77-year-old woman who told me about her standing up in the protest movement to free Lithuania and Latvia from the Soviet oppression, and her father. So, how can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? How can you look in their eyes and not see the light? How can you hear the story and not receive the gift? How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? Water splashes on the white sanded Black Sea. Cucumber soup and bread shared with new friends. Timor's graphic drawings turning around the story. Church tower and minaret together sing. A young boy I met in Bulgaria who was doing drawings, trying to bring together the Muslim, Orthodox, and Protestant people to be able to live together. Don't forget Lawrence, the forgiving peace chief. John beat by the sheriff, refusing to hate. Sue surviving brutal abuse, now the encourager. A brave speaker of hidden truth. How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? How can you look in their eyes and not see the light? How can you hear the story and not receive the gift? How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? toy soldiers reclaim, playing marbles in the shade. Orange trees planted where only mud laid. Lads playing checkers with the prods from down the street, not needing a dividing wall of peace. How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope? How can you look in their eyes and not see the light? How can you hear the story and not receive the gift? How can you see such beauty and not be full of hope?